Hello, I'm Todd Phillips, the editor of Canadian Auto Dealer. We're here today with David Adams, the president of the Global Automakers of Canada. Good morning, David. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Todd. Appreciate it.
Well, some fairly extraordinary developments. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff we're all hearing in the news with, the Ambassador Bridge and the blockade and such, and it seems to have triggered yet another wave of sort of U.S. protectionism, where some U.S. politicians are advocating for moving production or keeping more production in the States. So I thought I would reach out to your group who represent manufacturers who do build vehicles here in Canada. What's your reaction to some of this, if you will? First of all, the blockade and where it sits now, and certainly this protectionist sentiment we seem to be seeing flare up.
Well, it's a great question, and I think if you look at the bridge itself, we're certainly glad that the authorities there were able to get the bridge open again after what seemed like a while with the injunction being in place and not a lot happening. We are pleased to file a supporting affidavit for that injunction, and we're pleased to see Premier Ford announce the emergency measures as well. So between the two of those things, opened up the bridge, but doesn't seem to have done a lot for Ottawa or maybe some of the other border crossings as well. And I think to your point, this seems to be one more issue, I guess, that gets added to the scales when people are weighing where should they put their investment, Canada or the United States, that doesn't have Canada come up on the favorable side of the scale. I think you're right. It doesn't matter whether it's the previous administration or the current administration. I think one could even make an argument that the current administration is even more protectionist than the previous administration. And I think it's not too much of a stretch to suggest that perhaps some of the funding and some of the protesters around blocking the border and borders across Canada were to try and make that point that it's better for Americans to produce at home because they can't rely on other trading partners that can't seem to get their act together.
Well, the other thing is we're in a bit of the, if you will, silly season for politics because we're leading up to midterm elections not that far off, and so it's not
Right.
unusual, I guess, for politicians to sort of play to that home base. But there's a lot more at stake here when we talk about the supply. Obviously, we're moving into a period of battery production, electric vehicle production. There's a lot of pressure on both sides and careful negotiations that have been going on to try to ensure Canada continues to play a role. How do you think this plays into that sort of larger picture once the sort of the fans of the protests, the Ambassador Bridge, sort of cool down? What next in terms of this debate?
Well, I think it just adds again in a way to the challenge that Canada has in terms of securing that type of investment. And this space in terms of electric vehicle mandates, in terms of mandates being put into plants and battery development and whatnot is all happening very quickly. And we can look back through the press over the course of the last few months, and you've seen probably billions of dollars of announcements being made. So one can argue that things like the EV tax credit in the US, and even though it's not in place, but it certainly casts a pall over potential investment in Canada. And Canada really needs to, from my perspective, like do whatever it can to get these different border blockades and the blockade in Ottawa cleaned up and make it look like, or not make it look like, but rather reestablish that we are a good, reliable trading partner and that we have been an integrated part of a North American automotive industry since 1965.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, politicians, I don't want to sort of cast them all in the same light necessarily, can talk about, we're going to dismantle and be more protectionist. But the reality on the ground is it's a very interconnected ecosystem right now along the supply base, not just the manufacturers, but the supplier community that are located on both
Sure.
sides of the border, the Magnas, the Linamars, this company. So maybe speak a little bit to the depth of that interconnectivity for those who really want to sort of look at that protectionist debate in a different light, which is it's going to be a hard thing to do. Let's build on that connectivity rather than try to dismantle that. So.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think, there are some that are probably saying, well, we don't need this. We can just do it all ourselves. But number one, that would create a lot of short-term pain. I suppose you could probably, well, I don't know if you probably even make the argument that it's for long-term gain. But right now, you have things that, as I say, have been so integrated on a North American basis since the Auto Pact was signed in 1965, reaffirmed by the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, reaffirmed by NAFTA, reaffirmed by CUSMA. But I think the challenge that not only Canada but Mexico is having is, the ink's barely dry on the new CUSMA or USMCA, whatever we wish to call it, and we already have two automotive related trade spats with the United States, one being the EV tax credit and the other being the core parts issue under the agreement. So, we're dealing with a bit of an uphill challenge here to make sure that we can retain that very important access to the US market. But, I think Americans should be under no illusion as well that, as you say, Todd, there's a number of significant, a lot of significant investment from Canadian parts manufacturers in the US, for instance, and parts going from Canada into the US from jurisdictions up here. So it's not just a one-way street of parts coming into Canada to build vehicles here to be, re-exported back into the American market. And I think that's too often the simple calculus that's being done.
Well, it's fascinating times that we live in, and I appreciate you jumping on a call quickly to help share with our audience, our dealer audience, and others a bit of an update on where things stand, and certainly the GAC's position on that, the Global Automakers of Canada. So appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, David.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Todd. Appreciate it.
Good stuff. Thanks. Signing off.